Delusional Donnie has always wanted Washington, D.C. to look a little more like one of his golf resorts, marble gold trim, and his name slapped on every flat surface. For years, he had to settle for the old post office hotel and some cheap merch. But now, on his second time through the Oval Office, the man who never met a plaque he didn't love has set his sights on something much bigger than a lobby sign. He just convinced a hand-picked board to rename the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts as the Donald J. Trump and John F. Kennedy Memorial Center, or as the White House is already calling it, the Trump Kennedy Center. If that sounds like putting Trump on the Lincoln Memorial, that's because in legal terms, it's not far off. The Kennedy Center is not just a building that happens to be named after a president. It is a memorial created by an act of Congress in 1964 to honor a murdered head of state. Federal law literally designates it as a living memorial to President John F. Kennedy and restricts further memorials or plaques in its public areas after 1983. You don't just call a board meeting, mute the Democrats on Zoom, and decide, you know what, let's bolt another president's name onto this thing because he raises money and likes Les Mistrables. But that is essentially what Trump's people did. After taking almost no interest in the Kennedy Center during his first term, Trump returned to office and launched an aggressive takeover of the institution. He pushed out the longtime chair, billionaire philanthropist David Rubenstein, and rammed through a new board loaded with loyalists who proceeded to elect Trump himself as chair in February. He then fired the center's long-serving president and installed Richard Grenell, his former ambassador to Germany and a political attack dog, as the new chief executive. Grenell has been slashing staff, hiring allies, insisting every performance break even, and boasting that the programming will be for the masses and not woke. This is not arts administration. It is a political occupation. On Thursday, that occupation turned into what Trump really wanted, naming rights. According to the center's spokeswoman, Roma Darabi, the Kennedy Center Board of Trustees voted unanimously today to name the institution the Donald J. Trump and the John F. Kennedy Memorial Center for the Performing Arts, the new Trump Kennedy Center, reflects the unequivocal bipartisan support for America's cultural center for generations to come. The White House amplified the spin. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt jumped onto X to declare, "Congratulations to President Donald J. Trump, and likewise congratulations to President Kennedy, because this will be a truly great team long into the future." The website header was promptly updated to read the Trump Kennedy Center. There's just one small problem. At least one Democrat on that board says the unanimous vote is a lie. Representative Joyce Beatty, an ex officio board member because of her role in Congress, says she dialed into the meeting, tried to speak, tried to vote no, and was muted. I was on that call, and as I tried to push my button to voice my concern, to ask questions, and certainly not to vote in support of this, I was muted. Each time I tried to speak, I was muted, she said in a video posted to X. She added that for the record, this was not unanimous, and that she was not allowed to speak or voice my opposition. Other ex officio members, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries, issued a joint statement saying participants were prevented from speaking and that Trump is attempting to affix his name to yet another public institution without legal authority. Their point goes to the heart of the matter. Congress created this memorial, and Congress controls the name. Federal law established the center as a memorial to President Kennedy and prohibits changing its name without congressional action, they wrote. Joe Kennedy III, the late president's grandnephew and a former congressman, was even blunter. The Kennedy Center is a living memorial to a fallen president and named for President Kennedy by federal law. It can no sooner be renamed than can someone rename the Lincoln Memorial, no matter what anyone says, he posted on X. In other words, the board can vote on programming, budgets, and renovations. It cannot unilaterally rebrand Congress's memorial to a murdered president as the Trump Kennedy Center. Legal experts agree. Georgetown law professor David Super, who specializes in legislation, told CNN, there is absolutely no way they can do this legally. Federal statute governing the Kennedy Center says the board must assure that after December 21,983, no additional memorials or plaques in the nature of memorials shall be designated or installed in the public areas of the building. While the administration might argue that adding Trump's name to the institutional title is somehow different from adding a memorial plaque, the whole structure of the law is clear. This is supposed to be Kennedy's memorial, not a 24-point branding opportunity. Super also explained the catch, even if the move is unlawful. it may be hard to find someone withstanding a concrete legal harm to sue. Employees might argue reputational damage from having Trump Kennedy Center on their Autron. Descendants might try to claim injury to the Kennedy legacy. But courts could easily swat those cases away. That's the gamble here. Trump's people are betting that illegality without an obvious plaintiff is the safest kind of illegality. Meanwhile, Trump is out telling his people that he saved the building. At an event later in the day, he claimed that when he took over, the Kennedy Center was in such bad shape, both physically, financially, and every other way. He boasts that his administration is saving the center through fundraising and renovations, restoring the exterior marble, replacing interior chairs, fully renovating stages, raising record-setting numbers from donors, and pushing Congress to invest more money. To his supporters, the story is simple: a broken, woke institution rescued from decay by a businessman president, rewarded with his name on the door. The fact that the building already had bipartisan federal funding and was not, in fact, scheduled for demolition is left out of the narrative. Inside the center, the transformation has been rapid. Grenell has cut staff, hired political allies, and insisted on a break-even policy for every show and rental. Trump has rolled out a vision for a golden age in arts and culture, promising that the newly branded Trump Kennedy Center is not going to be woke. The 2025 Kennedy Center honors list looked more like a Trump rally playlist than the traditional mix of highbrow and popular culture. Sylvester Stallone, the rock band Kiss, Gloria Gaynor, and others that Trump has bragged he was 98% involved in selecting. The arts, once shielded a bit from day-to-day culture wars, are now being treated as another turf to conquer. For the Kennedy family, the renaming is an insult layered on top of all that. Maria Shriver, President Kennedy's niece, called the effort beyond comprehension. She reminded people that her uncle and Jackie Kennedy brought artists into the White House, elevated culture, language, and history, and built the idea of the presidency as a patron of the arts. It is beyond comprehension that this sitting president has sought to rename this great memorial dedicated to President Kennedy, she said. Jack Schlossberg, JFK's grandson, and now a House candidate in New York, has also expressed concern and flagged the muting of dissenting votes as part of a larger pattern of procedural abuse. From a democratic theory standpoint, this is Project Trump in miniature. Find a public institution built to honor shared values, peace, arts, law, memory, then stock its board with loyalists. Fire the people who treat it as something bigger than one man. Redirect its money and message. And finally rebrand it with your own name. The Kennedy Center is not the only example. Earlier this year, the administration also added Trump's name to the United States Institute of Peace building near the White House, turning what was supposed to be a nonpartisan monument to diplomacy into another piece of personal branding. Plaques mocking Biden, Obama, and Clinton have reportedly been hung in the White House itself. What looks like petty trolling is actually a sustained erasure and replacement project. Swap out older symbols of liberal democracy. Insert one man as the permanent logo. The deeper message is that Trump doesn't just want power. He wants posterity. He wants his name on something that will live in the tourist brochures decades after he's gone, next to Lincoln, Jefferson, and Kennedy, as if he belongs in that company. And because he can't plausibly rename the Lincoln Memorial, not yet, he's trying to weld himself onto Kennedy's memorial instead. That's why the Kennedy family's analogy is so sharp. It can no sooner be renamed than can someone rename the Lincoln Memorial. In a healthy system, that would be true as a matter of law and politics. In Trump's system, the board mutes the opposition, passes a motion, and dares anyone to stop them. Whether courts ultimately step in or not, the politics of this will live on. Democrats now have a simple visual example of what they mean when they say Trump is using public institutions to reward his friends and political allies. The next time he stands on a stage and talks about saving American culture from elites, they can point at the Kennedy Center and say, this is what he calls saving: firing professionals, installing cronies, forcing the arts to break even like a strip mall, and then slapping his name over the dead. President Congress originally chose to honor. For voters who grew up seeing that building as a quiet, dignified symbol of a different era, that image may be more powerful than any policy white paper.